This is John Zott, and this is Finance 360. Today we're going to be talking about EMH and its critics. These are the people that constantly point out the challenges of EMH, and this will be a chance for you to make your own mind up about whether the efficient markets hypothesis has much to tell us these days and what it's about. So basically, we're going to talk about the various natures of risk in this class. Explore some ideas from Nassim Taleb, think about what Montier says about risk, what Mandelbrot says about risk, and kind of come to some conclusions about what other people have said about the efficient market hypothesis and its strengths and weaknesses. Most people in the industry break risk down into two factors, risk and uncertainty. Uncertainty is different than risk. Risk has a known distribution, typically, and a known severity. And one way I look at it is if you can get insurance for it, well, that tells you it's a risk. If you can't get insurance for it, that's uncertainty. Frank Knight, in his book about risk and uncertainty, which I highly recommend, written in the 1920s, not the 2020s, talks a lot about how businesses really exist because of uncertainty. If it's risk, he says you can buy a bond. If it's uncertainty, then you have to actually perform and do something. Then it becomes a real distinct business. So a lot of it is the definitions of this are important because when it comes to stuff like risk with a known distribution of problems and a known severity, you can put some fancy math together and figure out how it works. The uncertainty, you can't do that. Now, quite a few people see the modern finance as not being compelling, right? Mandelbrot and Montier both don't think that the efficient market hypothesis is true. Mandelbrot, we used to use this book, Benoit Mandelbrot. He's a mathematician. He's passed away a couple years ago. He's very skeptical towards market. He considers the market. He comes from a perspective of empiricism. That means he looks at the data. He says, I'm not telling you how the data should be. I'm looking at what the data is, and the data is fractal. Now, fractal means it's very hard to forecast. And Mandelbrot says markets are very hard to forecast. They're misleading. They can be streaky. They're risky, turbulent. There are price jumps. These are all things that are not allowed underneath the efficient market hypothesis. Another big critic of this is James Montier. James Montier has 3 books out of behavioral finance, works in the investment industry. His feeling is it's not an efficient market, and that if you are levered, you're going to have some challenges. He's a famous one for saying this time is not different. All the times are the same. Right now, we're seeing some pretty high market valuations. A lot of it driven by the artificial intelligence industry. Is this another bubble? Is this going to crash? Montier would say this time is not different than last time, and not different than the time before that. That's what his viewpoint would be. Now, Nassim Taleb's a little bit different. Taleb's written some books. He wrote The Black Swan, and another book, Fooled by Randomness. Taleb is Lebanese. His thing was that, hey, for a long time we believed all swans were white until we visited Australia, and then we found black swans. And the thing that Taleb would say is just because something was the way it was doesn't mean it's going to be that way in the future. I love the example of the life of a turkey. A turkey thinks the farmer's his best friend the day before Thanksgiving, and then he becomes dinner. So I like to talk about Taleb because Taleb is also a trader, another empiricist, as is Montier, who is an investor, as is Mandelbrot. They focus on the data. The data tells them, there's a lot of outliers. There's a lot of volatility, and it is not covered under the math, under the efficient markets hypothesis. And the efficient market hypothesis is morphed over time. At one point in time, it said the market's always efficient, the price is always the right price. Now it says it's hard to beat, the market's hard to beat, and that you can't consistently beat the market. Now, even if you can't consistently beat the market, there's going to be a Warren Buffett, because for every one person loses their complete savings, there's one that makes billions. But I think if you talk to the people who make billions in it, the James Simons of the world, the Warren Buffetts of the world, they would say it's not an efficient market and you can actually make money in these markets. A lot of the problems with efficient market hypothesis is we're not a rational type of being. We do have emotions. We can be awfully arrogant at times. We can be very closed-minded. We can also lack skepticism. We don't always study the past as well as we should, and sometimes we make inferences from a world that's kind of more of a natural normal distribution to a world that's not a normal distribution, or as Taleb calls it, you can't look at Mediocristan and then go to Extremistan and get the same sort of results. Extremistan has huge variations, nonlinear results. And literally, if we were in a room together, the 20 of us, and Bill Gates walked in, and we'd say, oh, gee, the average wealth in this room is probably $50 million. And Bill Gates walks in, it's $50 million. Bill Gates walks out, the average value is probably, we're probably $100,000. So the reality is it makes a big difference, when one person walks in the room. That's Extremistan. Now, even Bill Gates is a tall man. If we were all in the same room, I bet we're no more than maybe a 1.5 difference. Maybe the short of us is 4'6". The tall of us would be maybe 6'4", 6'5". That's a very small range. That's Mediocristan. So trees don't grow to the sky, but people can have billions of dollars in wealth. Kind of two extremes of the distributions. So Taleb has a bunch of advice. I put that in, and I put in a bunch of things about what Taleb feels about how you should see yourself trading, how you should see yourself in life, opening ourselves to asymmetric upside potentials without downside potentials. And he's not a believer in experts or predictions of the future. He believes in being flexible. Now, I do have a section here about value at risk. The efficient market hypothesis helps us create the kind of value at risk statistics that we see. Value at risk is a measure. It's built into the Basel Accords, Basel II. They're actually doing it in Basel III. So VAR is at risk. Those of you that end up in banking will eventually run into a VAR statistic of some type. One issue about VAR is it's great. It gives you a single number, tells you what the value at risk is. The downside is it's not very accurate, and it can be very misleading. A reason why I bring up VAR is many of the Golden Gate University students end up in the banking world. I really think that you need to be aware of how these statistics are calculated so that you can look at it and say, hey, it says this, but I know how this is calculated. In the past, VAR has been reliable when there's no volatility and unreliable when there has been volatility. So we have not had a high period of volatility in the last, say, year and a half. We had a bit of one around the April tariff announcement by the president. When we get big volatilities again, we'll see how good value at risk works. Now, there are other ways of looking at the market, right? A lot of people try to fix what's broken in the market by using sort of new techniques and new math to figure it out. There's different ways of looking at it, where the fact is we think it's a normal distribution, but there's a non-stationary mean where it slides back and forth. There's other models that we have the Fama-French model, which has beta for risk, but there's also a 3-factor model, a 4-factor model. Arbitrage pricing theory suggests there might be models with as many as 6, 8, 10 factors. Expected return models can often use 100 factors. Haugen of Haugen Financial Systems used to run a model with like 130 factors in it. And yes, some of them are very small, but he figured, hey, it throws some extra value into it, put it in here. So now, latest one I would probably say that's been sort of gotten the most news is the adaptive market hypothesis by Andrew Lo. Adaptive market hypothesis basically says, hey, it's efficient because people adapt. This explains maybe one of the reasons why beta no longer works. So adaptive market hypothesis to one that you can think about. It does deal with bubbles, it does deal with crashes, and it does deal with issues like beta not working any longer. Now, many people think the market's a complex adaptive system. And when you have a complex adaptive system, you can actually kind of look at all the different pieces together and see how they evolve and they work. It makes it a very biological system, like people learn. And I think complex adaptive systems, Andrew Lowe's adaptive market hypothesis, can give us ideas for how things will work. If the market is a complex adaptive system, you need to have diversity of opinion. And diversity of opinion creates less volatility and more stability in the market. When the opinions all coalesce in one way or the other, they're either bullish or bearish. And then you have very high movement, very high volatility. So for the most part, there is other ideas to come out with which we call econophysics. There's neuroeconomics. There's these idea of theoretical pricing models. I do throw a quote in here by George Soros. George Soros is a trader. George Soros says, I don't use the math models. No one uses them. So it's something you have to be aware of when you get out in the real world. What do these models do? Do people actually utilize that? Do people actually use physics to study economics? And of course they do. Now, how effective they are, that's another question. So that's a big picture of all the different critics of the EMH. I mean, for the most part, we consider the EMH accurate, but it is not much help to us in investing. It's just something we rely on. If you have any sort of a non-EMH theory, that means you can trade and you can make money and you can take advantage of other people's inefficiencies. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call or drop me an email. I hope you enjoy this week's lesson. Thank you.